Hello folks, this is Sullla once again. Today I'm going to be doing a League of Legends podcast, the first one for me, and the subject of this podcast is going to be a guide for raising your Elo level in Season 2. Season 2 is just about to begin. It should be starting any day now, at least the pre-season for Season 2. And I'm going to talk here a little bit about how the whole Elo system works, the mechanics of how it works, and then a number of different ways on how to improve your Elo ranking for Season 2. So all different things that you can try to do to make the system treat you more fairly, make the system, ways to game the system, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go through that sort of thing. In the background, I'm going to be playing a replay sent to me by Atomos Core, the Jax player in this game. That's just so you can have something to look at while I'm talking for the next, 40 minutes or so. The one thing I've always disliked about a lot of podcasts is there's not really anything to watch while they're going on. It's often just a black screen or somebody sitting in front of a webcam. I figure I'll just have a replay running in the background for you guys to look at while I go through and talk about this system. So that's what's going on there. Not going to commentate this game. You can just watch the action and judge for yourselves. Anyway, so let's go through and first of all talk a little bit about understanding the Elo system, how it works, where these numbers come from, all that sort of thing, because I think there's a lot of people who don't really understand what an Elo system is, just to begin with. Now, Elo system is basically a ladder ranking system. It's named after a chess player who had the last name Elo, so that's where we get it from, and it's basically a way of establishing a ranking system between groups of competitive players. Most of them are derived, like I said, based off of chess is where this initially came up with, but ladders have been used in all sorts of online multiplayer games as well over the years. Now, the one that League of Legends uses is based off of a normal curve distribution, so I will try to stick a picture up here for you of what a normal curve looks like. Basically, what this means is that the vast majority of players are concentrated in the middle of the system, and as you get out to the further ends of the ranking system, there's fewer and fewer players there. For League of Legends, that means almost everybody is concentrated around 1200. As far as I can tell, it's actually a little bit below 1200. The middle point of the system, I believe, is actually around 1150. But nearly all of the players are concentrated between, say, about 950 and 1350. You get the vast bulk of players rated in that area. And then on the edges, on the extremes, there's very few players rated very highly and very few players rated very lowly. So that's basically where we get the normal curve from. And I'm going to throw up a picture again just so you can see sort of what that looks like. So let me give you some numbers in terms of where people are in the Elo tiers. It might make more sense if I do that. I'm going to throw these up on the screen so you can follow along with me. Now, in terms of total accounts, it's kind of hard to figure out what they are because Riot only shows you the top people who are rated at 1200 or higher, and there's a lot of people below that. But as far as I can tell, based on what Riot has said, there's somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 accounts that were used in ranked. And this is on the North American server. I'm going off these numbers that I jotted down at the end of Season 1. So let's just say roughly about 550,000 total people who played a ranked game, at least on North America in Season 1. So out of that 550K, we know that based on what Riot said, people who were at 1250 or higher were in the bronze tier. They said that that was the top 25% of players, and that fits with what we have. I noted that there were about 136,000 people rated 1250 or higher. So you'll often hear people say that, oh, well, 1200, 1250 is sort of trash tier, that sort of thing, but it actually is the top 25% of players. So anyone who can make it that high has actually done a pretty good job. Now, going off of that, silver tier was 1400 or higher in Season 1. There were about 45,000 players ranked in silver tier or higher. Then gold tier was top 3%, and that was 1520 or higher. There were about 19,000 players ranked in gold tier or higher. And then the platinum tier, 1900 or higher, there were, when I jotted this down, 1,336 players. So again, 1,300 players out of 550,000 total. So you can see very elite company there. Hardly anybody makes it there. Now again, in terms of the numbers, in terms of how the rankings go, basically what I found when I looked at this was every time that you go up 100 points in Elo, the total number of players tends to be cut in half. So in other words, as you go up in Elo, basically the amount of players is getting halved for every 100 points that you go up. Now, again, give you some numbers on that. 180,000 accounts were above 1,200. When you got to 1,300, there were only 94,000 above that. So again, we're down from 180,000 to 94,000. Then over 1,400, 45,000, over 1,500, 20,000. So we go from 180 to 94 to 45 to 20,000 at each level. So the total number of players is getting cut in half with every 100 points. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that as you go up in Elo ranking, the skill level is getting higher and higher on the players. So as you increase, you're going to be playing better and better and better players as you keep going up in skill level. Now, unfortunately, what that means is that because this is a ladder system, not everybody can make it to 2,000 Elo. It's just not possible. In the same way that no matter how much I might want to go out and practice at soccer, I'm never going to be as good as Lionel Messi. Or no matter how many basketballs I shoot, I'm never going to be as good at basketball as LeBron James. It's just not going to happen. People are just innately better at these things than others. Remember that because this is a ladder, every time that you win a match, that means that someone else has to lose a match. What we refer to this normally what this is referred to is a zero-sum game. That is, in order for one person to win, someone else has to lose in a match, and that's exactly how the Elo system works. So because of the very nature of the system, in order for me to increase my rating, I have to beat you. Someone else has to lose rating. It's just not possible for everybody to have a high rating. I mean, that's just the way ladder systems work. It's unfortunate, but no matter how hard you try, you're going to reach a limit where you just can't really progress further, and that's completely natural and intended. It's just the way the system is designed to work. So in other words, you can't get too stressed out. Remember, almost everybody's going to be concentrated around, like I said, that roughly 950 to 1350 bracket, and the vast majority of players are going to be concentrated in that. Not exactly sure, can't tell exactly what the numbers are for a standard deviation, but as far as I could tell, I believe that the standard deviation is around somewhere between 100 and 150 points of Elo. So for those of you who have some work in statistics, with the 2 confidence intervals, that means that virtually everyone is between about 700 and at the other end of that, I think it's around 1,500, and pretty much everybody, like 98%, are within the 700 to 1,500 range, and it's virtually impossible for people to make their way out of that. Okay, anyway, so enough about the system, just trying to give a little background on that and how it works. Now, other things unique to the League of Legends system. Whenever you first start playing ranked games, you start at 1200 rank. That's universal, everybody starts there. And your first couple matches, your initial 10 matches, are placement matches. You do not get an official rank in the Elo system until after you've played your first 10 matches. So your first 10 matches, you will gain and lose Elo ranking very quickly. In fact, it's normally about 50 points per match when you first start out. So when you first start out in those 10 placement games, you go up and down very, very quickly based on how you do in those initial matches. The logic behind this is that when you first start out, if you are better than 1200, you will be able to rise quickly and rise through the ranking system. If you are worse than 1200, you'll fall quickly and get into your proper Elo bracket. That's the logic. Of course, the problem with that sort of system is you are only 1 out of 5 players, and of course, all sorts of things can potentially go wrong in those matches. But overall, the key thing there is that the placement matches are very important. Your early matches are worth a ton of Elo points. So it's very important in terms of how you do in those initial 10 games. After that, the amount of points that you get, that you'll get after a match, both points that you gain for winning and points that you lose if you lose the match, they start to go down pretty quickly, and I believe it's after about 30 matches, you'll be right around about 12 points per match, pretty much every time. I had some people asking when I posted the screenshot from one of my ranked videos, people were saying, well, wait, how did you get 45 Elo points for that match? Well, it's because I hadn't played very many. I was actually only in my 11th match there, so each one was still worth a whole lot. Nevertheless, you have a lot of incentive to try to do well in your initial few matches because they are going to establish where you basically start out in the system. If you do really well, if you go, like 9-1 in your initial matches, you're going to end up starting around 1500. If you go, I don't know, 2-8, you're going to drop down to like the 900 or 800 bracket in terms of Elo, and from there it's going to be very difficult for you to climb out of there. Even if you are a better player than that, it can be very difficult to climb your way out. I mean, you can make it eventually, but it will take a while. So again, the logic behind the system is Riot starts everybody out at the same point, and then they will try to establish where your real ranking is very early on with those early placement matches. And generally speaking, I think it does a good job. Sometimes, however, people can, just suffer from bad luck. Not saying that happens all the time, but it can happen. So again, be very careful with those initial placement matches because they're very important, and you don't want to get stuck in some horror story of how you tried to play all your placement matches at like 2 a.m. and you lost a whole bunch of them, and you ended up in some low elo tier that you didn't really want to be in. I've heard people do that before, so just be careful. Try not to let that happen to you. Now, as part of that, it's probably not a good idea to start playing ranked immediately the minute you hit level 30, because chances are you're not going to do all that well, and you might end up regretting it later. Now, of course, you're certainly welcome to do that, and some people do, and do just fine. But again, just word of advice, if you are worried or concerned about your elo ranking, and you just immediately go and start playing ranked games the minute you hit level 30, there's a good chance that you're not going to do all that well. And like I said, you might end up in some bracket that you don't really want to be in. So anyway, just fair warning there. Alright, anyway, are some basics about the system and how it works. That's the first point I wanted to cover. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to go through and talk about different ways that you can try to game the system, ways to get ahead, ways to improve, things that you can do so that you don't end up in some poor tier, in some low elo tier where you don't want to be. Now, of course, this is a system. There are rules to it. You can always find ways to game the system to get around those rules, and I'm going to go through a couple of different ones here. First of those being duo queue with a friend. Now, there are some really weird, wonky things about how the solo queue system works in League of Legends. One of the strangest things is that there are separate ladders for 1v1. There are separate ladders for solo queue, 3v3 on Twisted Treeline, and then pre-made 5 on Summoner's Rift. But that's it. There's no, as I currently record this, at least in Season 1, those are the only ladders that existed. So teams of 5, solo queue, and then teams of 3 on Twisted Treeline, which hardly anybody seems to play. Doesn't seem to be very popular right now. Now, in the solo queue games, you are allowed to duo queue with one other person, but you can't queue with 3 or 4. It's either 1, 2, or 5. Now, this has always been kind of a weird system. I don't know why they allow people to do this. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, nor does it make a lot of sense for why you have a pre-made team of 5 ranking, even if you play with different teams all the time. I don't really understand why that is, but it's pretty well known out there that playing with a friend, duo queuing, gives you a pretty big advantage. They do increase the overall elo of your opponents when you duo queue, but nonetheless, it's still usually in your interest to do so for a couple of reasons. One of those being simple communication. You have someone else that you can communicate with easily. It makes it much easier to pass information back and forth from one person to the other. It gives you some person that you can trust out of the other people on your team. It's just much easier if you have 2 people on the team that you know together, and then you only have 3 strangers, as opposed to being only able to rely on yourself and having 4 strangers. Gives you just a person who you can talk things out with during the game. You can sound things out, go back and forth. You can say things like, hey, do you think we should make a play for Baron here? Do you think it's safe? And then you can get someone else's opinion. Oftentimes, it's just useful to have someone else there as a sounding board. So, like I said, communication, trust, it just gives you more overall control of the game. It's one fewer random variable to deal with. There's a lot of random variables in solo queue, and by reducing the total number of strangers in the game to one fewer person, you give yourself a better chance of coming out on top. Now, one other thing it does is, of course, it decreases the chance of having a player who disconnects, a player who's AFK, someone who's away from the computer while playing. Basically, your odds of that go from being 4 out of 9, that is, out of the other 9 players in the game. If it's even odds that someone's going to disconnect, it's 4 out of 9 if you are in solo queue by yourself, that it's going to be someone on your team. But if you are duo queuing with someone else and they are going to stick around for the game, the odds go down to 3 out of 8 that there's going to be a disconnect on your team. So you're just sort of playing the numbers there. You have better chances that you are not going to get screwed over if you're playing together with somebody else as a friend. So I know that that's basic common sense, but still, it's the sort of thing that if you're trying to win, you might as well take advantage of and have in your favor. It also allows you to set up useful combinations for solo queue. One thing that tends to work very well is you can have 2 solo lanes if you can set it up that way. That is, both of you have a solo lane, you and your duo queue partner, so it gives you more control. You don't have to worry about your solo lanes failing really hard. It gives you a better chance to win the lanes. Another combination that tends to work out really well is if you run someone in a solo lane along with a jungler. That tends to work out pretty well. Jungling in general, it's a good idea to either play a jungler or have your duo queue partner playing a jungler, just because jungling gives you so much control over the game. You're able to influence what happens in all 3 lanes, so oftentimes very useful to have a jungler. So like I said, solo and a jungler often tends to work well. And then the other thing you can run is duo queue in bottom lane. That is, one person plays an attack damage carry and another person plays support. Now, that doesn't always necessarily work out the greatest because, again, you're giving up 2 of those solo lanes to people you don't know. But on the other hand, the person who's playing the support can keep the person who is playing the attack damage carry alive during the early game. And then AD carries are usually the strongest champs late game. So basically, the support keeps your AD carry alive during the early game. And then in late game, your AD carry is strong enough that they can carry the whole team. So that's sort of the logic there. Now, when Varus, Nox, and I, we were duo queued together at the end of Season 1, and both of us got up to gold ranking in our matches, we did a lot of duo queue bottom lane. I would play Janna, and Varus Nox would play Kog'Maw, and it worked out pretty well for us on the whole. In those games where I played Janna, I ended up going 6-1, 6 wins, 1 loss, and we really should have won the game that we lost because we kind of hyper carried that game, but we just couldn't quite do well enough to win. Varus had 20 kills in that game, but it wasn't quite enough because our other lanes, you know, failed pretty hard. But you know what? That's going to happen sometimes. You also have to accept that too. League of Legends is a team game. Sometimes you're going to play great and your team's going to lose. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to play terribly and your teammates are going to carry you to a victory. It's a team game. It's just, that's the way it's going to work in a game like that. People always complain about when they do well and their teammates fail, but nobody ever seems to post about when they failed horribly in a game and their teammates carried them to victory. Isn't that funny? I guess that just never happens. Nobody ever plays poorly and their teammates carry them to a victory. Because you sure don't see people posting about that online for whatever reason. Anyway, though, that just getting off on a tangent there. But like I said, duo queue bottom can work really well if you have someone who plays AD carry that just hang around, farm in the early game, get super strong late game, and then you're able to carry your team just as long as your other solo lanes didn't get, you know, just horribly destroyed. You can put yourselves in a good position to win the game that way. So that's another useful combination. But 2 solos, solo and jungler, are probably more conventional ways to do that. Anyway, one final recommendation as far as duo queuing is it's a good idea to use voice chat as much as possible if the 2 of you are going to duo queue together. It's very easy to set up. There are tons of different programs that you can get completely for free that allow you to use voice communication. Skype, Ventrilo, TeamSpeak, all these free downloads online, easy to get. Microphones are very inexpensive. I picked up my first microphone when I first started online gaming. It was like $15. Never regretted the purchase. I've upgraded to a better microphone now to do commentary, but you can get microphones very cheap. Invest in one for $15 or $20. It's an inexpensive purchase, and it just makes it so much easier to communicate. So I can't recommend that enough if you're going to be online. If you're going to be online gaming, just something really useful to have in general. Download one of those free programs. Have you and your buddy together on voice chat, and it just makes it so much easier to play. Gives you one other person that you can talk with and allow you to sound things out, work together, and just communicate really well. So anyway, that's the first recommendation, is duo queuing with someone else. Now, second recommendation here, again, this is maybe common sense, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do this. And that is to stick to playing the overpowered champions in the current metagame. Now, League of Legends is a game that has about 80 champions right now, and although Riot does their best to balance them, they are not all balanced, not in the least. There are some champions that are just much stronger and much better than other champions. Like I said, this game is not perfectly balanced by any means. And there's really, if you're trying to win, if you're serious about winning games and improving your Elo ranking, there's basically no reason to play certain champs. Like, why would you play a champ that's underpowered if there's another champion that can do the same role on the team, but just do it better? So one of the tricks to rising in Elo ranking is not just play whoever you feel like it, but to learn who are the strongest champs in the current patch version, and then focus on playing them as opposed to other champs. So let me give you some examples. The key example, best example of this right now, I think, is Evelynn. Evelynn is the weakest champion in League of Legends right now. She is brokenly weak. There is no reason to play Eve under any circumstances. She is, without a doubt, the worst champion in the game. The only reason why someone would play Eve right now would be if they're deliberately trying to troll somebody else. And why would you do that? If you're serious about winning in ranked gameplay, you shouldn't be doing that, obviously. So don't pick a champion like Eve. There's nothing that she She doesn't contribute anything to a team. Her stealth ability is interesting to say the least, but just falls off totally late game, is weak early game, has no role in the current metagame, doesn't really do anything, that it doesn't fulfill any role that you would want to have on a team. All that she can really do is roam, and roaming doesn't really is not really in vogue right now. It's not something that people do. The current metagame basically developed to counter people who are roaming, so don't play a champ like Evelyn, that sort of thing. So how do you do this? How do you know which champions are considered to be the strong ones, which ones are considered to be the weak ones? Well, aside from the fact that that's basically all that the League of Legends forums ever talk about is who's overpowered and who's underpowered, the best way that I've found to do that is to watch the high-level games on stream. Just watch who are the people playing in those games, who are they banning in those games, who is getting played all the time, who's never getting played, which champions do people generally feel are really strong, which champs do people feel are really weak, that sort of thing. There's also all sorts of people who like to make lists of this. You might have heard of Element's tier list is the best known, but there's tons of different tier lists out there. So the resources are out there online to find out who's considered strong, who's considered weak, and it's not too difficult to find not too difficult to find if you just make a little effort to look for it. But keeping an eye on which champions are strong right now, which ones aren't, it just makes it much easier for you to win if you concentrate on playing them. So a couple more examples to give you here. I jotted down a couple examples. In terms of junglers right now, there are 3 junglers that are clearly considered to be the strongest junglers, those being Lee Sin, Nocturne, and Gangplank in some order. You would be wise to play one of those 3 junglers if you can, unless they're banned for some reason in ranked games, which they very well might be. They're very common bans, actually. So, like, if you're trying to figure out what champ should I learn next, a good idea would be look at which champs are considered to be really strong. Now, in contrast to that, there are other junglers who are very weak right now. I mean, can you play them? Junglers, for example, like Olaf, like Skarner. I mean, yes, can you play these champions? Of course you can. You can play them and you can win with them. And of course they have their own roles, but are they the strongest at what they do? Are they the strongest at their roles? And the answer to that would be no, not at all. A good example, Olaf against Nocturne. They're both AD type champions who specialize on doing lots of damage and trying to gank people. Between those two, Nocturne is just much better right now in the current makeup of the game than Olaf is. There's really no reason to play Olaf whatsoever in the current version of the game because there are other champs that fulfill that same role and just do it better. So, you know, if you're serious about winning in solo queue, don't play champs that aren't good at those roles. It's kind of a simple concept, but it's amazing how often you'll see people picking champions that are just not good and then getting angry or surprised when they don't do well in solo queue games after picking those champs. So if you want to screw around or just play champs for fun, I recommend custom games, AI bot games, that sort of thing. If you're serious about winning, try to pick champs that are actually strong. Don't go playing Sivir, for example. Sivir is the weakest AD carry in the game right now. You can pick pretty much anyone over Sivir. For another good example, don't play Karma as support. Basically, every other support is better than Karma right now. Don't play Karma as a support. Don't go playing Shen as a tanky. Well, this may be changing in the patch that's coming out for the start of Season 2, but prior to that, Shen was the weakest tank in the game. There was no reason to play him under any circumstances. So again, that may be changing, but prior to that, there was just no reason to play him because you had just such better options out there. Okay, and that brings up sort of another point there, which is that League of Legends is not a static game. The metagame is always changing. Which champs are strong and which champs are weak are changing constantly. It doesn't remain fixed. It doesn't remain constant. So this is something that changes with every single patch. You wouldn't believe how much grief I get sometimes over my videos where people will go back and look at old videos and then they'll criticize me about things that I said, which were true at the time, but now it's 6 months later and the game has changed completely with like 10 different patches. And what I said back then no longer applies. I think the example I've gotten the most is I said in one of the videos that Udyr was a weak laner. And that was true at the time. I wasn't wrong. Nobody played him as a laner. His skills were not good for laning at that point in time. I believe that was actually before Wriggle's Lantern was even introduced to the game. But of course, you know, 9 months later, the game had changed, and Udyr was considered one of the strongest laners in the game. So people would write things like, "Oh, well, why are you saying that? Udyr's a great laner. You know, you're a noob. You have no idea what you're talking about." And again, it wasn't that I was wrong at the time. It was that the game itself had changed. So in pointing out that whole thing about playing strong champs, playing overpowered champs. That's absolutely what you need to do, but you also have to keep in mind that what the strong champs are changes constantly. So you have to keep an eye on the patch notes, what's changing, and keep an eye on the changes. So I don't know what's going to happen in Season 2. Maybe different champs will be strong, maybe different champs will be weak. As Sivir was the weakest AD carry in the game for ages, and then she got super buffed, and she was the strongest AD carry in the game, and then she got nerfed, and now she's back to being the weakest again. So who knows what will happen, who knows what Riot will decide to do. They seem to make their changes somewhat randomly at times, but all we know is that things are going to be changing, things will be in constant flux, and if you can keep up with that, you stand a better chance of doing well than if you just, you know, happen to like one champ and it's like, oh, I love Heimerdinger, I'm going to play Heimer all the time. Well, Heimer's a very weak AP carry. He's not really a good choice. He kind of gets destroyed by the best AP carries right now. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Keep an eye out on what's going on in terms of what champs are strong and weak. Try to play the strong champs and you'll likely do better. I know it's kind of obvious, but again, like I said, a lot of people don't seem to do that. Okay, so those are the first 2 points I wanted to bring up. Duo queue, try to play the OP champs, try to play the strongest champs. Then the next point I want to bring up is knowing how to, before you go in and start to do rank play, you want to know how to play a number of different champs. You want to understand their different roles so that you can contribute to the team. So let me explain what I mean by that. You should be able to play about 2 to 3 different champs for each role, if at all possible. I know that not everybody owns every champ. Everybody owns different champs. It takes forever to farm up enough IP to get all the champs that you want. But before you go into rank play, you should be able to play a fair number of different champs, just because there's always a chance that if you only know how to play a couple of different champions, they're going to get banned or picked by the other team, and then you're really screwed. So you want to be able to play not just 2 to 3 different champs, but 2 to 3 different champs for each role at the game. There are basically 5 different roles right now in League of Legends, just sort of broad archetypes for characters. Those are AP solo, that is ability power solo, magic damage champion, usually goes middle lane. AD carry, that is attack damage champion, someone who does physical damage, usually ranged, usually in bottom lane. Some kind of a tanky bruiser type champion, usually goes in top lane, but not always. So some kind of tanky champ who can tank but can also deal damage. Good examples including people like, well, Jax is a pretty good example of that. Udyr, Lee Sin, that sort of champion. Then also next role would be jungler, and the jungler and tanky bruiser roles sort of overlap in a lot of ways. Some of them are more suited to laning, some of them are more suited to junglers, but a lot of them are similar champions. And then finally, last role, support. You know, a support normally goes bottom lane, normally does not take a lot of farm, normally does not try to kill minions, usually just tries to support the team, buys a lot of wards, it takes clairvoyance as a summoner, all that sort of thing. So those are really the 5 roles that are in the current setup for League of Legends: AP solo, AD carry, support, tanky bruiser, and jungler. So ideally, you'd want to be able to play a couple different champs of each one of those roles. That is, not just be able to play one of each of those, but be able to play a couple champs in each of those roles. You know, just so that if you know, you are stuck in the support role and you only know how to play Soraka, and then the other team picks Soraka right before you, you don't want to be in that situation, because then you're going to be really, really screwed. The other reason why it's nice to be able to play a couple different champs in each of those roles is that, of course, different champs are good at different things. Now, my own specialty is in playing supports and in playing the AP solos, AP carries. Those are the champs that I've had the most success with. They're the ones I've played the most. And which one I will try to pick for a game depends somewhat on what the other team is doing. For example, if the other team is running an all area of effect damage team comp, like, you know, if they have a Mumu plus Annie plus Sona, something like that, I'll be more inclined to pick Janna as a support, just because her ultimate directly counters that sort of play, directly counters area of effect damage, than I would be to pick someone like Soraka or, you know, say Taric in a team like that. Taric would actually be a pretty bad pick for something like that. Also, in terms of picking duo lanes, that is, the 2 people are going to be in the duo lane bottom, you definitely want to try to get some kind of synergy between the 2 champs that you're playing there. If you can get some kind of synergy between the 2 champs, it helps out a lot. One example that would be let's say you're going to play support and the AD carry on your team wants to play Ashe, you don't really want to take a champion like Soraka in there. Now, Ashe Soraka is great late game, but Ashe Soraka is so incredibly weak in lane that the other team can dominate you if they pick if they pick strong laning champions. For example, if they were to pick like Alistar and Caitlyn, or Taric and Caitlyn, they could just absolutely crush you in bottom lane. So you'd probably want to take someone who's a little bit stronger in lane to balance that out. Similarly, if you want to go for early game advantage, if you want to take a laner who's really strong in the early game, like Caitlyn or Miss Fortune, then you might want to take Alistar or Taric as a support to go along with them. Because your goal, if you're picking someone like Caitlyn, is to win early game, because Caitlyn's not very good in late game. So that sort of thing. Other matchups you can kind of do, for instance, if you want to run, like I said, an area of effect team comp sort of setup, like let's say someone has picked a Mumu on your team as the jungler, you know, and you're thinking, okay, who do I want to play as the solo mid champion for this game? I'm going to play a caster. Who do I want to pick? Well, it might be a better idea to pick someone like Annie, if that's the team comp they're going with, or maybe someone, I don't know, even like Swain, but just someone who does some kind of area of effect damage over someone like, I don't know, Kassadin. You know, Kassadin's more of an assassin type champ. He doesn't really have area of effect damage. So just, again, trying to synergize with your team. The more champions you know how to play, the more you can synergize with your teammates, and the better you're likely to do. Just picking random champions on the screen, I mean, you can certainly do that, and, you know, you can sometimes do well, but when you do that, if you can have a team comp that actually makes sense, you're likely to do much better than if you just have people picking random champions all over the place. Okay, so other advice that kind of goes along with that. I don't think that you should try to play ranked unless you can jungle. I think that that's a pretty basic skill to playing well in League of Legends. I know that there are a lot of people who are not familiar with jungling. It's really not that hard to do. Just see if you can Google for some videos or search for them on YouTube. It's not really that hard. There are some junglers that are very easy to jungle with, even if you don't have the right runes and masteries. Even if you don't have the perfect rune setup, some of them you can do. You can jungle with pretty easily. Warwick is the first example that comes to mind just because his lifesteal, but there are some other ones too. It's pretty easy to jungle with a number of other ones. Nunu is also quite easy to jungle with, although he's kind of an underpowered jungler right now. But you know, I would just suggest don't playing ranked unless you can jungle, just because there's a good chance that nobody else is going to want to jungle, particularly at lower skill levels, lower tier levels for Elo. There's a good chance that nobody else is going to want to play a jungler, and if nobody else is willing to do it, then you should be the one to jungle, because jungling is very, very powerful in League of Legends. Again, most people probably already know this, but the reason why you take a jungler is you get more total gold and experience for your team. If you have two solo lanes, the idea is you have two solo lanes, one top, one mid, then a duo bottom, and then your fifth person is farming the jungle. If you don't have a jungler, no one is farming that jungle, so you're getting overall less gold and overall less experience. And the other thing is the element of surprise. When you know, example, like people are pushing a lane, people are pushing towards the tower, and then your jungler comes out from behind, and the jungler comes from behind and kills them. That's sort of the idea there. Because they don't see your jungler, they don't know where they are on the map, the element of surprise means that it's easier to get kills. If you don't have a jungler and there's two people top, two people bottom, it's very easy to account for everyone on the team, so it makes it much harder to get kills, that sort of thing. So anyway, running a jungler makes sense. Like I said, if no one on your team wants to jungle, then you should be the jungler. It's as simple as that. It's actually pretty easy to carry games as junglers. We had a lot of success when we were doing our ranked games with Varus playing as Nocturne. Nocturne, a very strong jungler at the moment in the current setup of the game, allows people to punish anyone who overextends. So you can carry very easily with jungling. Another good example of that is if anybody watched when Riot did the show match a number of months ago, they did the Noxus versus Ionia match. In that game, if anyone wants to go back and watch it, Guardsman Bob played as a jungle Udyr, and he just completely dominated the match. He was like 10-1 or something like that. Just completely crushed the Noxus team in that match and just carried. So you can carry as a jungler, so you might as well learn how to jungle, fulfill that role for your team, and be prepared to do that if nobody else is, which, as I've found in my experience, happens a lot. That just, you know, you say, hey, who wants to jungle, and nobody says anything, and you're like, well, I guess that's going to be me then. So that's one way that you can have a better success rate, is know how to jungle and be prepared to jungle if no one else in your team is doing it. Now, another tip of advice is, if possible, in solo queue, it's generally better to try to play some kind of a carry, that is, some kind of a solo lane champ or a jungler, as opposed to playing a support champ. Now, you can still play support, and in fact do well. There are some people that have gone all the way to 2000 skill level, solely on the back of playing supports. But in generally speaking, it's easier to dominate a game if you're playing a if you're playing a solo lane of some kind. It's generally easier to play, generally easier just to control games, to have more influence over what's going on. So if you're really good at support, don't be afraid to do it. It's very rare that you get good supports in solo queue, just because not many people are willing to fulfill that role. And a good support is quite valuable. Someone who's always warding up the map, giving sight at all points in time, saving people with their ultimate. Like I said, a really well-placed Soraka ultimate or a well-done Janna ultimate can completely swing fights and win games. So I mean, you shouldn't be completely afraid to play supports in solo queue, but generally speaking, you do have more influence over the game if you play solo lanes or junglers. So just something to keep in mind. If you feel like you're, not having enough influence over the game, you're likely going to do better in the solo lanes. Now, again, so I think I've covered just about everything here. Like I said, you just want to avoid that situation where you are forced into one particular role on the team and all the champs you know how to play have either been picked or banned. As long as you know about 3 champs, you should be in pretty good shape. I had actually ran into this myself when I was playing playing my own placement games for ranked. I ended up in the jungle role, which is not something I'm great at, but I am able to do it. And the 2 junglers I wanted to play were Warwick and Gangplank, and Warwick was already picked and Gangplank was banned, so I ended up having to play Rammus, and I mean, it worked okay, but it didn't really go that well. And we ended up losing that match because I didn't really play all that great. So if I had known how to play more junglers, if I had owned Nocturne, which I don't, or if I had owned Lee Sin, which I don't, then I could have picked one of those, and it would have gone much better for us. So anyway, like I said, just know how to play different champs, know their roles, and you'll likely do a whole lot better in this game. Okay, and that's going to take me to the last point that I want to bring up today, which is something that is often underestimated, but is in fact extremely important to doing well in solo queue, and that is having a good attitude and having good teamwork in these games. How many times have you seen somebody post on the forums that, well, I'm really good at League of Legends, but I lose all my ranked games because everybody else on the team is just noobs and feeders, and they're all terrible, and that's why I lose my games. We've all probably seen that about 10,000 times before. It's one of the most overblown things that people come up with in League of Legends. Now, while I'm sure it's partially true, it's so over-exaggerated to the point of being almost a parody of itself at this point. People all constantly claiming that I lost because my teammates are bad. League of Legends lends itself to that pretty easily due to the fact that it's a team game, so it's very easy to place blame on people other than yourselves. It's not like StarCraft, which is mostly a one-on-one game, where if you lose, it's pretty much your fault and there's no one else to blame other than yourself. Like I said, League of Legends team-based game, it's always easy to assign blame to somebody else, and in fact, it seems to be what the overwhelming majority of the community does. So let's go through some ways that improving morale, working together with the team are things that you can do, and this does in fact have a very real influence on the actual gameplay. So I'll go through some of these things. First of all, don't try to play ranked games if you're in a bad mood. When you're in a bad mood, when you're not feeling well, your mental state does affect your performance. If you're just having a really terrible game, and if you want to play some League of Legends, why not play a normal game or a custom game or co-op versus AI or just something else? Because when you're in a really foul mood, it's going to affect your performance. It is going to affect how you're playing in this game. It definitely does with me. There have been times where I just didn't really feel up to playing a game, and I went ahead and played anyway, and it usually didn't go well. So if you can step back and just step away from the game for a little bit, you'll likely do much better. It's also the case that if you're on a long losing streak, you also might want to step away and just take a break, come back to it the next day, because when you're getting frustrated, you're not going to be thinking clearly. You're going to be getting more and more frustrated, and it's definitely likely to affect your performance. So again, basics of psychology, but something that I've seen a lot of people ignore and sometimes get on just dreadful losing streaks because they just were, in a bad place from a mental state. Now, another thing that goes along with this, if you're playing ranked and if you're serious about winning, then focus on the game. That is, don't Alt-tab out of the game constantly to talk to people on some kind of chat client or watch YouTube videos. How many times have you been watching, for those of you who watch League of Legends streams, how many times have you seen one of the top players immediately, they'll get a queue and they'll do the bans, and then they'll have first pick, and then immediately after they pick their champ, they immediately tab out of the game and start watching a YouTube video, and they don't come back into the game until after it's already started, and they never said one word to any of their teammates. And then when their teammates picked champs they didn't like, they immediately said, oh, well, everybody else on this team is a noob, or everybody else on this team doesn't know what they're doing, without ever taking 1 minute to stop and talk it over with them, or actually work things out ahead of time. So if you're gonna play this game, and you're serious about winning, then be serious about winning. Don't be watching YouTube videos while other people are picking. You know, pay attention to the game and don't be paying attention to another stuff. I don't understand. Maybe it's because I'm older than a lot of people. I'm actually not a teenager. I'm not a college student, but I don't understand the constant obsession of chatting with people while playing an actual game of League of Legends. There's no real need to do that. I mean, you're playing a game. Isn't this supposed to be fun? I don't understand why you need a break from your own entertainment. You need to be doing something else. Anyway, maybe that's just because I'm older. I'm not. When I was in school, we didn't have all the Twitter stuff. We didn't have as much communication. And I realize that I sound like I'm horrendously old as I say that. But in any case, just a fair point. If you're going to focus on the game, focus on the game. Don't try to be doing 3 other different things at the same point in time, because it pulls your attention away and you might miss something important. You might miss something that someone else typed on the setup screen that would have allowed you to work together better. Now that goes along, again, with the next point I want to bring up, which is you need to be able to talk to your teammates, especially in the staging room. There's nothing worse than being in the staging room on the picking and banning screen, and everybody just sits there and nobody says one word to anybody else, and you end up with some bizarre team comp that doesn't work together, where nothing fits, and you guys have nothing to do with one another whatsoever. So you want to avoid that if at all possible. And again, it's easy stuff, it's basic stuff, but I don't know how many times I've seen people do this. You know, they go through the picks, and then they pick their champ, and then immediately they alt-tab out to watch a YouTube video, and they don't say one word to anyone else on the team. There are several very, very high-skilled players that do this in solo queue on their streams, and then spend the rest of the game complaining about how everybody else is so stupid because they picked stupid champs, even though they never said one thing to them. So talk things over on the staging screen. Talk to the other people. Try to figure out a lineup. Ask people, who wants to be the jungler? What do you guys want to play? If you watched the videos I did when I was going through the placement matches, the first thing I would type in every game is, okay, what does everybody want to play this game? What do you guys want to play? What are you thinking? That sort of thing. No reason not to figure that stuff out. And the more planning you can do ahead of time, the more likely you are to be successful. So anyway, basic stuff, but you need to be able to talk to your teammates. Now, after the staging room, you still need to communicate throughout the game. Communication is very important. I mean, again, some of this is basic stuff, like if you see people leaving your lane, calling that someone's missing. On the North American servers, people normally type MIA for missing in action. My understanding is in Europe, people normally type SS, is short for miss. But some indication that someone's left your lane, giving people a heads up. If you're playing support, it's especially important to let people know what's going on. You should be trying to track the jungler in the early game, letting people know if you spot somebody coming up the river for a gank that is coming up the river to try to kill somebody. Just pinging it normally can help. I mean, they might have seen it themselves, but at the same time, they might not. So just ping it if you see it, and that will direct people's attention. Even though I'm pretty good at watching the minimap, I miss stuff sometimes, and people have really saved me sometimes by pinging things. So that's one thing you can do to help people out. Talking to teammates about strategy, also very important. You want to be talking about typing things like, hey, Dragon will be up in a minute, or we should get ready for a Baron fight, or they're pushing bottom lane, can we send somebody down there, that sort of thing. You need to talk. You can't just assume that everybody is going to do what you want them to do, which seems to be the case more often than not. People just assume that it's like, oh, they should do this, and then when somebody else does something differently, then you just blame the other person. Well, maybe it's their fault, but maybe you could have typed something and, you could have figured something out as a team. So the more communication you can do, the better your team is likely to do. And again, once again, I know that that's basic common sense, but it is something you can think about. Now, one more thing I want to bring up is being polite in solo queue is extremely important. In a perfect world, everybody would try their hardest at all points in time, but this is not a perfect world, and managing other people's egos extremely important in solo queue. You need to try to make sure that people do not give up and just get ready to quit on the game, which is something that happens all the time. Now, again, like I said, people will quit, people will rage. The more you can do to try to prevent people from giving up, the more you can do to try to prevent people from raging, the better your chances are of winning the game. So even though it might be irritating to have to play babysitter to the other people in your game, if you're serious about winning, it's the sort of thing that you actually do have to do. So, like I said, one way to do that is just be polite to other people. That is, don't tell people that they're stupid, don't tell people that they're noobs, don't tell people that they're retards. There's no reason to type that sort of thing. Even if you think one other person on your team is an idiot, then just think it in your head. Don't type it in the team chat to the rest of your team. That's not going to benefit anything. they're saying something like, OMG, my team is so stupid, in all chat to the other team, nothing positive is going to come from that. Only bad things are going to happen from typing something like that. Your team is going to get frustrated. They're going to get angry at you. People are going to be more likely to give up on the game because they're going to get frustrated. So, like I said, even if you think someone is a complete moron, and even if they are playing like a moron, just keep it to yourself. And instead of typing about how stupid they are, try to type more encouraging things to the rest of the team. Like I said, it is important to keep morale up. You can type things like, hey, we have the better late game team comp. Even if you don't, you can type that, and it will sometimes just get people to keep trying, get their heads in the game, get people to stick around, make it less likely they're going to leave. I have typed that before, even when our late game comp was absolutely terrible, just to make people think that if they stuck around, we'd have a better chance to win the game, as silly as that is. Telling people, you know, if somebody messes up and says, if somebody ends up dying and they say, you know, like, oh, I'm like, my bad, sorry, that shouldn't have happened. Typing something like, no problem, we'll get them next time, or no big deal, something like that. Again, I realize that sounds kind of corny, kind of cheesy, but again, in terms of babysitting people, keeping people from quitting, it does actually help when you can type things like that instead of like, oh my God, I can't believe this person, they're so stupid. Can you believe what? You know, can you believe what Katarina just did? Unbelievable. If you're typing that all the time, people are going to get frustrated. They're not going to want to play on your team, and they're going to be much more likely to initiate surrender votes. So, you know, the more you can do to keep people from giving up, from quitting, that stuff does matter. Do not tell people that they suck, even if they do, because it doesn't achieve anything. It won't do anything to help your team. Then finally, don't give up in solo queue games. Even if you're behind, solo queue games are very disorganized on the whole. People make mistakes in solo queue a lot of the time. These are not pre-made teams of 5. People are not used to playing together. People can get very, very sloppy when they get ahead. Sometimes people on the other team will start outright trolling when they get ahead. So don't give up just because you're behind. If you stick with the match, sometimes you can turn things around even from very, very bad positions. So my advice would be, don't initiate surrender votes. There's really no reason to initiate a surrender vote that I can see in the game. I mean, if your goal is to win the game, by surrendering the game, you certainly can't win it. All you do is, the only thing you can get out of that is potentially, I guess, the match ends earlier. But I mean, the match is supposed, I mean, you're playing a game for fun, so why are you so anxious to get it over with anyway? I guess I don't quite understand that. It's really quite funny. Oftentimes, I'll see people will initiate surrender votes, and then they'll like get angry if people don't surrender the game. It's like, wait, you're angry that the rest of the team won't give up? But that seems to happen more often than not. So don't initiate surrender votes. When you initiate surrender votes, it's like it's like a message saying, I don't think we can win this game. We should give up. Don't initiate surrender votes. Try to stick with it. Like I said, people are very sloppy in solo queue. People do not know how to win games. I don't know how often I've seen people throw away games that they could have won, that sort of thing. So the longer you stick around, the better your chances of winning, and you know, you might actually be able to turn things around. I've certainly won games I had no business winning before because the other team made mistakes. So bide your time, hang in there, and see if the other team makes a mistake, and there's a very decent chance that they will. Okay, hold on right here. Alright, anyway, that was a little bit weird, but in any case, we should be back. Anyway, I'm just about to the end of this, so as a way of sort of wrapping this up, I'll just try to summarize. We are more or less at the end of this video. I think it goes on just another minute or two. Things that you need to do in terms of summing this up, like I said, understand the system, know how it works. I think I went through that in way more detail than I needed to. Try to duo queue with a friend, if at all possible. Try to play the strongest champions, the stuff that's commonly referred to online as the OP champions. Figure out who they are and try to play them. Know how to play different roles on the team, know how to play different champions, and then try to have a good attitude, try to have good teamwork, that sort of thing. Be willing to communicate with your team. Don't get frustrated even when your team is playing poorly. Try to keep their focus up, try to keep them from giving up on the game, and you know, you might just have a chance to turn it around. You certainly won't have a chance to turn it around if you surrender at 20 minutes, which I've seen happen way more often than it really should happen. Now, you can't win every game, but what you can do is put yourself in the best position to win games. Like I said, you won't always win, but what you want to do is try to do everything that you can to win games when you have the opportunity to do so. And these are just sort of a checklist of different things that you can do in terms of fulfilling that goal and in terms of trying to raise your elo. So again, I'm not an expert at this. I haven't really played that many ranked games, but in playing the placement games at the end of season 1, Varys and I were following this advice, and we ended up going 9-2. We won 9 out of 11 matches, and we really should have won a 10th match. We actually came really close to winning 10th match, so we did quite well, I'd say. And unless you want to claim that that was just dumb luck in terms of how those games went, then I think that these points, these sort of things actually are onto something and will give you a better chance to win this match. Anyway, we're down to the last 2 minutes of this video, so I will commentate the very end of this video with Aphromu's team. We should be getting up to the last fight. Just one quick note about Atomos Core's, or I said about Atomos Core's build here is he really should have more magic resist. There's not really any need for all this. Anyway, pushing here in middle lane, they're actually going to catch this Trundle out of position here, and now it looks like they're going to finish him off here. That's going to allow them to push middle lane. For whatever reason, Lee Sin is up in top lane. He is not here where he should be, and they're going to have free access to this inhibitor in middle lane. Going to push straight up mid. Only 2 champions here, Nasus and Orianna. Meanwhile, they have 5 here. Trundle's still down for 55 seconds. Now LeBlanc is coming in here as well, but they still have a straight 5-on-2 here, and they should be able to win this with no trouble right here. Poor position. Lee Sin's going to get back here, but he's already too late in getting back to the battle, and it looks like he's going to get, looks like, was that LeBlanc or LeBlanc clone? No, LeBlanc is still up. Lee Sin getting here, but it's too late. Only 2 members of the team still alive, and right now they should be able to engage. There's the Taric stun, and Lee Sin's going to die. Now it is a 4-on-1. Heimer was off in top lane for some reason, but now it's a 4-on-1, and there's no way that LeBlanc can defend these 2 Nexus turrets 4-on-1 this late in the game. LeBlanc becomes very weak late in the game, and she just got absolutely bursted down there by Atomos Core. So that should be the end of this match right here. Everybody is dead on the enemy team. Ace of the enemy team, Trundle, will be arriving in 9 seconds, but it's not going to be enough. I don't know why they're wasting time on the inhib right here when all they need to do is push over the 2 Nexus turrets. They've got this game. They just need to finish it off here, and they will be able to take this one. Despite being back in their base for most of the game, they were able to turn this around and come out on top. So nice job by Atomos Core. Did have a very strong Jax game, 16-5-14. Jax becomes super strong late game, so doing exactly what he should, and this should be the end of it finally right here. So just take a look at those last item builds, and we should be able to wrap this up. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Try to do more podcasts in the future. So until then, take care, guys, and good luck to all of you in the upcoming Season 2.